half boy, half god, all Apollo. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast about Percy Jackson and the whole wider rest of the Riordanverse. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Clara. And today we're discussing The Trials of Apollo, Book 3, The Burning Maze.
Ooh. This episode is brought to you by Macro Automation. Are you a business owner struggling with the recent worker shortages? Don't fret, because Macro Automation is here to help. Their automated employees never tire, can't get sick, and don't need annoying bathroom breaks. Their living wage is a one-time payment, and they're specially programmed to bust unions. Sure, sometimes they self-destruct, but that's just the cost of doing business. Stay ahead of the competition and upgrade your workforce today. Macro Automation. Employees 2.0.
Love
That's a
it.
good one, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love poking fun at capitalism and unions.
You know.
Those unions.
Those pesky labor laws.
So if you're a YouTube viewer, you'll notice there's no video this week, just because of technical reasons, but we should be back with video in the next video. Let's get right into it. The Burning Maze.
Sorry, that's the most accurate thing you could have possibly said.
There will be video in the future video.
Yes. All right. Our general thoughts on The Burning Maze, and I'm going to start it because I have a history with this book. So I want to start by saying I've come around on this book. The first time I read it, which was almost just about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, I ended up stopping right after, spoilers, Jason's death, because Riordan books were my comfort food at the time, helping me through the pandemic, and they just made me happy. And this book is friggin' depressing.
Yeah.
And I got annoyed. But just because it's depressing doesn't mean it's bad. And I think that overall, I have nitpicks with this book, but I think it's better than the sum of its parts. I think overall, when I look at the book as a whole, I like a lot of things about it. And I mostly like the character work. I actually think it's Meg's best book yet. I think that I really like Piper in it. I really like Grover, a whole lot of stuff. So, Clara, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. I tried to recreate Dan's experience by reading this book and then stopping when Jason died. And then
you went back to the beginning.
And then and then we did Daughter of the Deep, and then I finished it a few days ago. But it's a sad book, not in a bad way, in a sad way, in the way that strong emotions can be strong, right? This book leaves an impression. I think it's some of Rick's best writing. Really sophisticated concepts. A lot of the writing reminds me of the what was it? The Chained God.
In Blood of Olympus.
In Blood of Olympus.
Yeah, with Piper.
And Annabeth. The really intelligent writing about emotions is a strong through line in this book that I enjoyed quite a bit.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say that I talked when we did starting in the Hidden Oracle about how I feel like each book in this is about him learning about an aspect of humanity. And, the first book being empathy, potentially, the second book being about mortality and death. And this book I really think is about grief, but also is about loss. Especially when you also include Meg's loss of her home and all that stuff.
Yeah. So. I think this book is a giant bummer. And arguably, if I wasn't in a better place mentally for the week that I was reading it by playing Animal Crossing again, I would not have been able to handle this very well, because and I agree, it's very well written. It's very emotionally intelligent. It's challenging in a approachable way to, some younger listeners, while not necessarily being off-putting. But at the same time, I can't say that I walk away having said I enjoyed this book, but that's okay. Just because something's good doesn't mean everyone's gonna enjoy. I can personally say this was good. I don't know if I will pick it up I always say,
you're not going to pick it up for fun.
But that's the thing is that really the merit of a Rick book that I want to rate it as. And I mean, we'll see that when we rank them.
Yeah.
But
I think for me, this is one of these times where I say, I love that this is in a series and it's not a standalone. I think a lot of these books in some ways could be standalone, like Monster of the Week type, even if there is a sort of plot where you're building to fighting all of the, taking down the triumvirate or something.
Yeah.
But this is one where it only works in the larger. It's like
it feels like part 1 of 2 to me.
It's a part 1 of 2. It's one of those really emotional episodes that comes like 3 episodes before the finale in a TV show, where you get just the gut punch emotional, like now we see where everyone stands going into the finale.
Yeah.
they've hit their rock bottom and now they have to climb out of it. They've faced the worst thing that imaginable, and now Dan's making a face about
Dan,
hitting
you
rock
jerk.
bottom.
You weren't supposed to read ahead.
Yeah, I might have read Tyrants too.
Anyway, the point is, I'm not saying it's their ultimate rock bottom, but it is a rock bottom, a new low
it's a
for
turning
them.
point for sure.
Yeah.
And they're faced with a what do we do from here?
Yeah.
And so do I. That's how I feel too. Where does Rick go from here?
Yeah.
Well, I like that instead of making the big bad the stakes here, he's made their emotions the stakes. Like he's made their sense of togetherness. He's made that the thing that's going forward, instead of like, and now it's time for the biggest thing we've ever done. Oh, but it's times 4.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, it's times 2 of that. Like it's really just like they have actually really experienced a loss.
Yeah, and I think that's great, and that's the thing that I'm a little torn about, because so one of the things, a lot of my criticisms of this book, I don't know if they're really a criticism of this book as much as it's like a criticism when you look at Rick's works as a whole, like, or, you know, comparatively to each other or whatever, as far as it really sticks out to me in a negative way that Jason dies here and not in Blood of Olympus, because I'm like, you know, because Blood of Olympus was supposed to be the highest the stakes can ever possibly be. And he, in my opinion, you know, flubbed it. And now it's like, okay, so he doesn't die fighting the Earth Mother. He dies fighting Caligula. And
in a book where he doesn't have a POV.
Exactly.
He doesn't have as much emotionally going on, in my opinion, as Piper does.
Yeah.
I think that, like, while Apollo and Meg are the stars of this book, Piper is a close third. So that doesn't leave Jason in the top.
Well, that's the thing. I think that he dies as a minor character.
Yeah.
And whereas if he had died in Heroes of Olympus, it would be we killed off one of the main characters. Like, if you look at just this book and the way it's structured, you would think as us, we would go, well, the death of Jason has to be the climax of the book, right? It's like the most intense thing that could possibly happen. But really, it's, oh, a minor character died. That propels us into the third act. And
that's so weird because it's Jason.
But so the flip side of me being like, it's weird stakes wise, you know, as far as like we built up Gia for 5 books and it went nowhere. But on the flip side, it works really well for Trials of Apollo, that in the 3rd book, things have a turning point, and that makes sense because we're halfway through and we need to feel like things are rising.
I have a hard time because I would think that a death of a important in-universe character, while I see what you're saying, Clara, about like it happening like in the 3rd episode of the 3rd to last episode of a season. Typically seasons have at least 10 episodes and now this only has 5. So for me, by that proportion, this should have been the kind of thing that happens in the penultimate book of the series. So now it leaves me being like, where do we go from here? Because a death of a main named character is like one of the
highest,
one of the most emotional things you can do.
Yeah. And I think this goes to what his death serves to do is, because he's not important to the story, he's important to some of the characters in the story.
And the readers, if they've read.
And the readers and me, because Jason was my boy by the end and they killed my boy. My boy. But there, in some ways, this feels to me like a flip of that, you know, you kill the girlfriend to give the drive, right? this is that for Piper.
Mhm.
And then it's also the explaining loss to a non-human character trope as well. So it does Jason a disservice, but Jason has never gotten anything but the short end of the stick in his entire my gosh.
It adds a little bit of insult to injury in my opinion.
Well,
for Jason.
For Jason.
I think I do think I get where you're coming from. I don't think I'd quite go as far as to say that it feels like fridging because of the way he dies, that it very much is his active choice and that he knows it's coming and has made his peace with it. But, you know, it's very much a heroic death. It's the kind of death you want for Jason, just not there. And so it's...
This is the weirdest book, in my opinion, to have it be only from Apollo's perspective. Like, I don't think I really had that problem in the last two books, but I think in this one, I'm like, I feel like this would be a good one. Not that it would make sense to have it all of a sudden be multiple narrators, but I'm just saying this is the one where I was like, I want a Piper chapter again. Even Meg chapters, hell, Grover chapters, like even things like that. Like there was more territory, let alone, of course, Jason POV. Yeah. There was territory to mine there, but that's just not how this series works.
For me, I actually kind of really enjoyed just having Apollo's perspective. One, because I think it would have been even more depressing. For me, it showed Piper, you could really see Piper's strengths here because she wasn't second guessing herself or anything like that. She was able to really just be.
Yeah.
And she was questioning herself for sure throughout a lot of this. But because we had Apollo's narration, there was never any question that she was anything but like a strong young woman.
Yeah. And she'd grown up significantly since we last saw her, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful if we do think about this as a sort of teaching book in some ways, like for young people with grief. Having Apollo seeing grief modeled for him and experiencing it at the same time is kind of an interesting way of doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about Piper, so I see where both of you are coming from, right? Because I think part of the downside of it being just about Apollo and just from his perspective is I think until Jason dies, I'm like, why is Apollo the main character of this book? Because he doesn't actually have much going on until he feels almost like, you know, like our narrator as opposed to like an active character in the book until Jason dies. And so that I think is kind of a letdown. And then the other thing is that we have to have a lot of telling, not showing, as far as why did they break up? How is Piper feel? Like
we didn't really get telling about that either.
I'm specifically talking about like when they're sitting in the clothing room in the ship. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I personally. This is where I'm saying where I'm like, I think it's better than some of its parts. Like, because if I focus in on things like, wow, they broke up off screen after they got together off screen, that really frustrates me. But as far as like Piper within this book, Piper's freaking awesome in this book. And I really enjoy hearing about her and, you know, seeing her journey within the book. So.
Yeah, I can't walk away from this being like, that wasn't good. It was objectively very good. I'm not into it. I walk away like, and it's really not just a thing of like, I didn't get my funny stuff. It's like when it tried to be funny, it missed the mark for me. I'm not saying was like, oh, this is terrible comedy. We've had our terrible comedy and I've made my thoughts clear. It was more just like, it doesn't make sense to have the humorous, lighthearted action adventure moments once we get into this really hard emotional stuff.
Yeah.
Like Macro was the lightest this book got, and then it was just a bummer
like chapter
throughout.
1.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like we're like, this is things blow up and it's just going to keep blowing up for these characters.
And I think the thing, you know, to be specific, I think the thing we both talked about that it feels kind of weird is when we get into the crossword stuff. Yeah. Because that's very fun. Yeah. That's very classic. That's very enjoyable, adventure-y. But having that directly after the Jason stuff, even though I understand, he's like, okay, let's ease the tension. It just feels weirdly dissonant. And that's why part of me still feels like maybe they should have ended the book on Jason dying. But I did like that they ended up having Crest die at the end too, to sort of continue on that theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, Crest's dying was very impactful for me.
Mhm.
And I don't know what that says, but
I think it was pretty impactful.
Yeah.
I think they just wrote Apollo caring about him very well.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily care about Crest as a character, but Apollo did, and I care
Yeah.
about Apollo.
yeah.
It was a funny thing where he was just like, it almost reminded me a little bit of Tyson
Mm.
and Percy, where like, you know, it's that big, you know, almost like because Crest looked up to Apollo for like music, I want to be like you. It reminded me of how Tyson looked up to Percy,
Mhm.
and then that didn't go well.
Yeah.
As opposed to Tyson and Percy. So yeah, it definitely it rung a little bit similar
Yeah.
to me. So
So I guess the thing is, I feel very torn about I feel torn about the time post Jason dying, because I like everything in and of itself. I guess it does feel a little jarring to go. Like, I really enjoy the crossword stuff. It just feels jarring.
Can I tell you what actually might be contributing to me feeling less bad about this book was I took this big hiatus.
Yeah.
Jason died, and I was like, well, putting that right away for a while. Then I got back. Everyone was very sad. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure you are sad. I remember being sad about this too.
Yeah.
I've
a
had
long
my
time ago.
And then I finished, and I was like, wow, really good stuff. I'm going to go back and reread. And then I was like, oh, wait, sorry. And then what happened with the crossword puzzle? Like, that was two days later.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, at what point do I just say my list of everything sad
Yeah,
that
go right
happened?
ahead.
Okay.
Let's do the sad list.
I mean, basically, where do I start with the fact that Grover's like, the environment is on fire and all my friends are burning and dying.
Yep.
And then you have Meg's like, my dad and I got evicted from my childhood home, and that began my like orphan abuse story,
Yep.
and now I'm back where it started.
Yep.
Then we have, Piper and Jason
dad.
broke up.
Oh, yeah.
But worse than that, Piper and her dad are now being evicted. His career is over. He's been scammed out of his money.
Piper's dad, man.
Yeah.
Even worse than all the men in Piper's life. It's
Yeah.
unfair.
Yeah.
And Piper.
Mm.
Sorry, keep going.
No,
I know there's
I'm
so
just
much more.
I'm just saying that I want to circle back to her
Yeah, to her
dad when
stuff.
we actually do that in the
Yeah.
recap, but I have thoughts there that are not just like sad thoughts.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Piper's losing like the home that she's had of late.
Yep.
Then we go to Jason, who's sad because he and Piper dumped his butt.
Good self-censor there.
Thank you. Kicked him to the curb. Then Jason dies.
Well, and
Then-
before that, Jason's like in a funk because he knows he's gonna die.
Right, of
Yeah.
course. Thank you. He said he's like,
Yeah.
either I die or Piper dies,
Yeah.
and I don't want either of these things to happen.
Then Meg is like, I want to murder everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, which is just like, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Then Apollo talks about how Helios, like his confrontation with Helios, and he's like, the god I looked up to and could never fill his shoes truly. He's dying too.
Yeah.
And then we have Leo and Piper on the tarmac and having to tell Leo that Jason is dead and he never got to say goodbye.
And Crest.
And
And
Crest,
Apollo
of
killing
course.
himself.
Yes.
oh
Apollo
my God,
killing
how could I
himself.
forget? Oh,
Because there's so much
Yeah.
depressing in this book.
Apollo's self-harm scene was a choice.
So here's the thing. There was like an awkwardness of him. I wonder if it was added in even after the fact, where
I
someone
bet.
was like, Rick, maybe like say like, don't do this at home, kids.
Yeah.
Because that part of it was awkward and not very good.
No.
That said, I
was
think the
necessary.
actual action and scene, I think, worked really well.
Yeah. No, being in Apollo's head and being like, I caused this, I'm going to remove myself from the equation. But also, this feels like horrible pain, the worst pain. I regret doing this, but I don't emotionally. But I mean, exactly. Don't do this at home, kids. I was like, you have to say this, but man, does it take the wind out of what is actually happening in the story.
But I think it also helped that he was like banking on Medea saving him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It was a gamble.
Nonetheless, I mean, we've had our characters be beaten up before. I think this is the most that we've seen.
Violence.
Well, gruesome injury and pain,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like described and in Apollo's head and also in others, like the sunburn of like the burn victims basically, and like Piper's jaw being broken,
and
that was
with
horrifying.
Piper, it's because of the nature of the violence to Piper, it's incredibly like domestic violence-y in a way that I don't know whether that's what was going for with one of the like the female characters. But Caligula was like calling her like my love and stuff, and then like slapped her face and she fell on the ground. Like, it's very brutal.
Yeah, it's very brutal.
I think that there is some unintentional but however concerning things, and when you have characters who are underrepresented, or at the very least just of minorities, and then you have them experiencing a certain level of violence or misfortune in a certain way, you occasionally can fall into a trope or an area that can be a little bit iffy. Yes. And I didn't really necessarily connect that with the domestic violence nature.
I didn't read it as domestic violence personally, but
well, one of the reasons I did was because Caligula, and I know we're just sort of jumping around here, but Caligula has a really interesting thing that he says sort of about like Apollo, like, you don't even know what it means to be a survivor. Like, I grew up in my uncle Tiberius's court, and in order to survive, I needed to be able to like do all these things, you know. He has so much of this series is about surviving trauma and abuse as a child. And so the fact that he then hurts Piper in a way that is just, I mean, it's just physical, brutal.
I guess more felt like it was about him being like misogynistic and evil. Like, because
but that's what
I guess what I'm saying is that like there's no human connection between Caligula and Piper.
He's evil to everyone. Case in point, how he twists people's words just to cause them pain. To me, it was just he is an incredibly abusive person, as opposed to specifically domestic abuse, which I feel like for that to feel that way, it would have to be like Megan Apollo or something. You know, like it would have to
Megan Nero.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, but I think that's also why like images of young women being slapped in the face to the ground is now I feel like we should have content warnings on this podcast.
Well, I mean, we're just talking about what happens in the book. Right?
And we're not using like gratuitous language, I guess, as well. But I mean, the fact that she is native, like it has that unfortunate line that can be drawn to it that, you know, given just victimization, I guess. But
you don't leave this book thinking Piper's a victim at all, in my opinion. I mean, I don't.
No, I don't. No. I think he does exactly what he needs. I just think that the imagery, in terms of thinking about that, this book doesn't just have so many like sad things happen. It's also some of his most like brutal writing.
Even the dryads, like having her legs be like gone, and the scale of her burns. Like, even though it has this like, again, the fantastical nature of it, it's nonetheless very. It's a new level of upsetting that I think that we could have reached before, like in our fights, in our other, you know, in Blood of Olympus and all of that. Like, we could have had things equally heavy and full of stakes, but we never reached them. Well, he wasn't doing that then.
And I want to say, as far as like I feel like people have been in potentially as bad a position as Piper was on that boat. But the difference is, I think of like on a video game, if something is like rated E, it will say like fantasy violence.
Yeah, cartoon violence.
And this isn't that. Him doing that, it wasn't even involving a sword or anything. Yeah. Right. That was just violence. And I think that's why it like stuck out to, like, an extra part of why it stuck out to us in this series. Because it's one thing to have someone, like, you know, people get like arrows in their shoulder all the time and get poisoned, you know, get stabbed or whatever.
Like, okay, so like Zoe dying, right, compared to Crest dying, right? Like, similar sort of like, this is a one book person who, like, Crest is less important, right? But like the physical description of death here is very different.
Well, and actually, it's interesting that you bring up Zoe, because Zoe was killed by her father.
Yeah.
And you do not walk away from that book being like, oh, this is a book about domestic abuse.
No, you're
or something.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is just such a different kind of book.
This is much more grounded in, again, real trauma, real emotion, real grief.
Yeah.
Real suffering. I'll just say that this series so far, really, even at its lowest moments, it has moments of true suffering that I don't know that have only really been met with like maybe Hazel's storyline, Nico, basically our children of Hades / Pluto. I mean, no, I think that it is Rick upping the ante.
Leo actually too pretty bad.
What?
I was just saying Leo also is pretty bad history.
Yeah, with his mom and his family. Yeah. I just mean to say that those were our standout moments before. And I feel like this one book had just as many of those kinds of moments as maybe we've had throughout the series.
Yeah. And I think there's been...
pentologies.
Yeah. I think there's been these moments. Heroes of Olympus is so interesting because it'll be sort of like a Percy Jackson book. And then all of a sudden you'll get this flash of that, right? Where like a character, you learn about the character's backstory and you're just like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to give you a hug. But here you are witnessing it. You're not in their minds. Yeah. Maybe that's another thing is our narrator is like us experiencing.
Yeah.
And so we're not getting some of the things that people do as they're going through a traumatic situation by saying, sort of like, I'll make it through, like whatever. Like we're just witnesses to this suffering.
Yeah. Also, I mean, all of our characters would bring up like bad things that happen to them, but Apollo, again, by being in his head, he very much is learning and remembering his experiences in the past since becoming mortal. He's still bringing up the trauma of Hyacinthus. He's still bringing up Heloise, it's
his dad.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, this book really is about how much Zeus sucks, in my opinion.
Isn't every book?
I really hope that how is he going to handle this in the 5th book? Like, how is he going to quote unquote resolve things between Apollo and Zeus?
Zeus gets turned into a mortal and tossed down to earth by the Olympians.
And it's a one-off and I get to write it. Rick, I call dibs.
And Zeus is never allowed on Olympus again. Yeah. I that was my major question while reading, and thank you for that reminder. I'm like, I don't know how Apollo can forgive and or forget. The whole thing is Apollo promises not to forget in this book.
One of the really interesting themes to me, and the first time I ever thought like, okay, maybe the Styx thing, but was that...
What do you mean by that?
So Styx is like, oh, all these promises, Apollo, like promise, like, and now you can see like the consequences of this. First, I don't like that the consequences because of I hate the idea that Jason died because Apollo swore he'd never play music again. Like that sucks. But an interesting question is like, is breaking promises part of being mortal? Is breaking promises crucial to being is keeping promises crucial to being a god, and being unable to keep promises part of being human? Like there might be some sort of interesting theme there.
Yeah, but it still doesn't make sense with the mythology of the world because humans can't break things from the text.
Of course not, Dan.
I just the thing too that I was interested concerning the Styx in this book is he supposed to be losing his powers because of the Styx or because of he's been mortal for longer? Like, I wasn't sure if he was saying, oh, if you had your godly powers, you would have been able to save Jason.
Let's go with that.
Yeah. But the fact that we don't know that, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't particularly enjoy that being up for interpretation. Yeah. Like, the author, the truth is whatever you want it to be. I'm like, no, I'd like the mythology and the rules of the world. Like,
the all heroes of Olympus.
Riordan is not interested in rules anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, and he's just like, I want to write what's going to be interesting and I want to write good character stuff. And if I don't have a reason why something can work, just say, maybe it was this and we'll move on.
And it mostly works.
Yeah.
I can hand wave it away.
Yeah. I just want to say, I mean, we're talking about a lot of super mature things and dark things that he did. And I feel like we're coming off like, doing dark, mature things is a bad thing. And I don't feel that way personally. I think it certainly stops being comfort food, like I was saying.
Yeah.
And you can have debate whether like how well it caters to its original demographic. But as far as just looking at the story as itself, I don't think doing these darker, mature things is hurting the story.
Yeah, like I think this is some of Rick's best writing,
Yeah.
and I think that it's a really fantastic book, especially because it's in a series where not every book is like this. Although this is
Well-
definitely a darker series than Percy Jackson.
Yeah. I mean, my question is, and I guess we'll see, excluding Dan, who did read the fourth book,
Yeah.
And
is this his new normal? Or is this like the exception? I guess. Like, is it really going to be like more YA going forward? Or is it still like...
Well, can I say what I would have thought, what I was thinking before I read Tyrant's Tomb?
I guess.
Yeah, I'm just because I know what I thought, which is, well, the next book has to start with a funeral. So like, it's not like the next book is gonna be sunshine and roses all, you know, like
No,
it's the fallout of the previous book, and the previous book's incredibly dark. So you can't not have the fourth book be
right. But there's but again, is it going to be like, well, we bury or burn Jason, and then we go on to have a bunch of crossword-esque macro adventures again, and then we take a while to get back to the next dark, traumatic stuff? Or is it going to follow more of this pattern where it was like a little bit of light, but more dark?
Well, I think it's interesting, too, if you look back at Dark Prophecy, because we did have, I had to murder my boyfriend of Commodus. We did have...
Oh, yeah, that wasn't light either.
Yeah,
it
we
just
had to
had more
have
humor.
The guy who had to have his head cut off. There was certainly a lot of dark things throughout that, too.
And this goes back to what Clara was saying. I think all of us have been saying, really, is that this is a darker, more mature series.
Yeah.
However, we have lighthearted, goofy stuff, especially in Hidden
Oracle.
Yes, Hidden Oracle and Dark Prophecy. Far more. We had the Nuggets. We had Commodus's like arena silliness. Like, I'm not, there was a lot more fun than there is here. And I'm not saying that makes this a bad, but like, I really don't want to come off being like, this was bad because it wasn't fun. I just kind of want to get on his level, and I'm not sure what that level is now. Like,
I mean, it all comes back to Hidden Oracle not being very good and not setting the tone for the series.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think that really, I mean, it sets the tone in the last third. I think the last third of Hidden Oracle is pretty similar, at least to Dark Prophecy, and then we just build from there.
Yeah.
But
it feels like he started with a continuation of Percy Jackson, and then he was like, actually, wait. No, this is a continuation. This is what Blood of Olympus should have been.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that we're 35 minutes in, shall we begin the recap?
Yeah. All right. So we begin with Apollo, Meg, and Grover battling the Strixes. Or is it Strix? What's the plural of Strix?
It is Strixes.
Yes. Okay. With panic, strawberries, and music.
I think this is a very fun cold open. The only thing that sort of takes away from it for me is that they were very similar to the Arai. The whole idea of like, you can't kill them because they'll curse you, and it's not obviously as intense as that. I really do like that we get to see him use panic again.
Yeah.
And it helps, but it doesn't fix the problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I also like the fact that Apollo is like, it starts the thing of Apollo then having a connection to Grover because he reminds him of Pan.
Yeah.
So it's a nice little shortcut, in my opinion, for their relationship.
And like, shout out to Grover in this book.
Yep.
Yes, definitely.
Not annoying.
Yeah.
I moved on from that. Okay?
No, I was speaking, that was 100% my feelings.
Yeah.
He's grown up. He's a grown up old goat.
It's interesting because I wouldn't necessarily say that like within this book he has an arc. It's just so impressive to see who he is now versus who he used to be.
Right. And it makes sense. It's not like it's weird. It totally makes sense based on where we last saw him.
Yeah.
Yes. They meet Grover's cactus friends, and Grover and Apollo head into town to find Coach Hedge because Millie is worried about him. Yeah. Also, baby Chuck, super cute. I love it. Hedge is at Macro's Military Madness, which is owned by the evil Macro, and they defeat him by turning his automatons against him. Meanwhile, Apollo realizes that Caligula is the third emperor. Mr. Little Boots himself.
And that he has a talking horse. So a lot of stuff to say here.
I'm so glad Caligula's the
villain.
The villain.
Yeah.
I was really confused how they were going to do Caligula. And the answer is Rick was going to lean into him being really evil. And I just never, that's the reason I didn't expect Caligula. Because I was like, Rick can't do Caligula. Well, guess what, folks? He does.
Oh boy,
And
does
he. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And we met all the plant people. And I'll say I like the location more than the individuals. I think that this little team is hurt by the fact that it's coming after the way station.
Yeah.
I think if we went from Hidden Oracle to this, we'd feel like, oh, what a step up. Now, I don't think the plant people are bad necessarily, and they're not nearly as important to the book, but it does feel like a step down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just they're not as impactful as Emmy and why am I forgetting? Josephine. Thank you.
And I'll say, on the flip side, I do think that the cistern itself is a very memorable location.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about macro, Clara?
So okay. Speaking of rules and what they are and whether they exist or not. Can anyone bring someone back from the dead? Can a god bring someone back from the dead? No.
Nope.
No. I have the answer to that. It's no.
Yeah.
Now like at some point, some people could come back from the dead for a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about that here, right?
Yeah.
How? I enjoy him.
They specifically say Caligula brought him back to give him a second chance, which makes zero sense, especially because the rules of what these god emperors can do and what they are, is so vague. But we definitely know that even Asclepius can't cure death. So, like,
it's one thing that they stayed alive due to human memory and kind of slowly gained power and wealth and whatever. It's another thing that they're straight up like defeating or like evading Hades or something.
Unless this comes back to be a plot point where Hades is like, yeah, you're right. I'll personally deal with this myself in my cool 5th book that's all about me and my son Nico.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a weird oversight / it would have been so easy to say that he came through the doors of death and set up shop. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't just say that.
To make the god emperor more powerful, I guess. Like,
yeah, but then they never have that power ever again. Or anything like it.
Do they? You haven't read the 5th book, and don't you start.
I would just say, I mean, like, even in this book, his whole goal of Caligula is to become a real god, a real boy.
Yeah.
So clearly, they don't actually have, like, god-level abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think they're supposed to be more akin to the Hunters of Artemis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Ish. It makes enough sense, I guess.
I'm getting distracted by the fact that, so there's this one quote from the Iliad that's used in the crossword puzzle about Zeus sending Hypnos and Thanatos to Sarpedon. And that whole piece, I might have even talked about it here before, but Zeus really doesn't want Sarpedon to die. And he's like, I'm just gonna not let that happen. It's totally fine. And Hera is like, I think it's Hera is like, actually, no, that's not how it works. Someone tells him, like, it's not how it works. Maybe he figures it out on his own. I don't remember.
I don't know. Zeus figuring something out.
Yeah, probably
that
not. I think it's more sort of like, what would happen if you did this for your son? We'd all kill you.
Yeah.
Because you didn't let us do it,
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you're right. So he sends like Hypnos and Thanatos.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember if that's the same story or a different story that's referenced, I think, in the short story about Hades and the sword, where they first meet Bob. There is something about Hypnos there, and there's also like the god of ghosts or something. But there's also the myth that involves Zeus being afraid of night, which he brings up in House of Hades.
Yeah. But I'm just wondering whether there could be some sort of a like, well, maybe gods can't bring people back to life because of god rules.
Then wouldn't they bring back more of their?
No, you're trying to make sense of a mistake.
Yeah.
Like, quite honestly, like, especially to do that in this book where you want to be like, guys, Jason is dead for real. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's not coming back.
We haven't read the fifth book.
Yeah, but like
We haven't read the
he's
fifth book.
dead.
Well, considering what was happening in the sidebar of one of Rick's Barnes and Noble events for Daughter of the Deep, I do think he's gone for good.
Yeah.
That's how I got.
We should say you got spoiled. That's a pretty
freaking
major.
spoiled at a Daughter of the Deep Zoom chat thing that was just R.I.P. Jason, R.I.P. Jason, and I was like, he's who dies in book 3. That's what happens in book 3 that made Dan stop reading.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
It's a bummer.
I was furious.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, but I honestly don't think it ruined my enjoyment of this. But like, knowing that happens didn't make me go like, I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting to hate this.
Yeah.
I was actually pretty open-minded going into it, all things considered.
Yeah.
So, anyway, back to recap.
I don't even know, what we were talking about.
Macro.
Well, we just macro hedge adventures,
Military
very fun.
madness.
I like that Grover problem solved them out of that as well. That was smart.
And I like it. The military madness thing feels so very classic Rick, like going to Auntie M's and Emporium and all that stuff. It's been so long since we've had a monster own a store.
Yeah.
And I just really love that.
Yeah.
And I want to say specifically, because I mentioned how different Grover is, but like, I really like how they show him being like exhausted and pushing through it and like wanting to say no to Melly, but he's not going to say no to Melly.
Yeah.
And like him doing things, very brave things without complaining.
Yeah.
Like, because even like, I feel like even by the end of Percy Jackson, it was like, oh, he's doing brave things or whatever, but he's still going to like whine about it first. And
except at the very end, really.
Yeah.
Like he has a turning point by then, and now he's exemplifying his growth in adulthood.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he uses something Annabeth taught him from Last Olympian in this, even if it might be like convenient. I don't know.
I like it.
it's fudging the rules, but it's still fun.
Meg takes Apollo on a memory vision and shows him that they are staying at what remains of her family home. We see that her dad was working on special seeds and that Caligula destroyed their home.
So you want to say something?
I just want really quickly.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's fine. There are no rules. It's all right. Everyone has their own special magic.
Yep.
But Meg is still so, like, she still feels so much like a self-insert of a 13-year-old girl that sometimes I can't bear it.
I understand
And
that.
just this thing of, like, Apollo being like, how were you just able to share your memories with me? And she's like, I don't know. I guess I'm just, like, incredibly
good.
special and good. Was like...
Yeah.
We
But it's fine.
easily
It
could
was
have
such a
had
good
them
scene.
both be asleep and go on a, like, he ends up in her
Yeah.
dream somehow and
Yeah.
he's like, why am I here? And
Yeah.
she could be like, I don't know. I don't want you here. Like, even if
Right.
they do something where it's a little bit more like, I don't know, not necessarily combative, but not on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like it gives her this special talent of sharing memories, which seems unrelated to all the other things she can do. And she can already do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like, I don't know.
Yeah, it comes back to what I was saying, where it's like Rick is like, I want to have this scene in which Apollo envisions this. How do I make that happen? And instead of coming up with a way to make it happen, he just says, because he can do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so like, but ultimately that scene, the scenes themselves are very, very
Yeah.
good.
Very good
Really
scene.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is an example of one of those things where it's like, well, Grover has an empathy link with
Yeah.
Percy. Maybe this is an empathy link. Is it or isn't it?
Yeah.
And the empathy link was like this whole thing that's I don't know.
Well, and
she's
I do also
yeah.
want to, because people might say like it's similar to Hazel showing her memories to Frank, but also Hazel was having like weird memory meltdown thing.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying we have Apollo literally reliving his memories. We have had Hazel weird memory things.
There's room.
There's
in
room-
This
There's
wiggle
room
universe.
in it. I think
Yeah.
it's less that like it goes against the rules and more just a sort of like Meg can already do enough.
Yeah.
You're not going to make me like Meg by giving her more special powers.
Mhm.
I think was more
Yeah.
sort
That's
of like,
fair.
and Meg goes on a journey in this
Yeah.
book where I
Yeah.
enjoy her. I like her by the end, but this was one of these things where I'm like, no, you're not helping by doing this,
Yeah.
Meg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, though, I will say, as far as her actions, I don't have any issues with Meg in this book.
No,
for the first
no.
time. Yeah.
No, this is the closest it comes for me, honestly. And this
Yeah.
isn't like a Meg thing. This is really a Rick
Yeah.
OP thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Anyway, a terrible fire in the labyrinth is killing nature spirits and guarding the captured oracle Hierophily, or the Sibyl.
Yeah.
Yes. Apollo and the gang need to free her and stop the fire, so they head to Piper's house because she knows the way into the maze. So Piper's dad is in major trouble. Caligula has ruined his career, gotten him in trouble at the IRS, and now they're being evicted. Oh, and Jason and Piper broke up. Yes, that has less to do with Caligula.
Well,
and Piper's dad.
Actually, technically, it's supposed to be because of Caligula, because they let Jason get to the prophecy thing on purpose.
Yes.
Well, but they broke up
before that. I was like,
that was a red herring.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly.
Yeah,
but also, like, maybe Caligula's like, I will make them weak. And it's like, Piper already made this decision for you, Caligula.
Yeah. Anyway, let's focus specifically on the dad right now.
Okay, Tristan McLean, A-list star. He is a native man robbed by the white man.
Through trickery.
Through trickery. They took his property, his land. Now he's being sent back to the res, which historically is a place of, and he's broke. It's a place of poverty.
I was so upset for Piper that I foolishly didn't even.
This was so uncomfortable for me to read.
The opposing way of looking at that is that he is commenting on how bad white people do that. I mean, it certainly is the bad people that do that.
Yes.
And it's not, I think...
It's not said with approval. It's like not...
And I don't think that was... I think that was an unfortunate consequence of just the simple fact that he just wanted to get them back to their roots. And again, I feel like he had beats he wanted to hit and didn't necessarily think totally through how do we get there. Because... it's a big difference when Meg gets evicted versus when Piper gets evicted. Yeah. And I know he wanted to create that parallel and connect the two people, and I think that worked.
But there's more baggage when you do it with indigenous peoples in North America. Yeah, no, I mean, it's deeply... I hadn't made all of those connections and put them all together until you really laid it out, and that is a lot. This is the thing that happens with Piper's story throughout all the books for me, where so many of the beats he wants to hit with Piper, I don't know what it is, but he just seems to miss them. Let her just explore her roots. It doesn't actually need to be like from a place. It doesn't need to be from a place of trauma. Let her explore her roots. Let her be in high school without her being teased for her race. Let her... Well, now she's not being teased for her race. She's being teased because her dad is broke and ruined. Right. Like it's just...
and I think... I mean,
in this book.
If we're focusing on this book, I don't think she's teased for a race. And if we're focusing on this book,
but it's her general issue.
No, it's her. And she's so clearly trying to find herself in this book. Yeah. And there are so many ways, like the conversation that she has. And I know that you don't like it maybe as much as I do, but I really enjoy her conversation with Apollo later, where she's talking about like I'm trying to find. There's so many parts about me that I'm trying to figure out. Like, I need to do that. And that's a great time to think about your heritage and all sorts of other things.
Yeah. Who am I? Where do I fit in this world?
The question of matrilineal descent. Like
all that stuff I do like, to be clear. We'll get to what I don't like about that later.
No, like, and so, like, he doesn't need to do this. It feels unnecessarily cruel. And Tristan has really, like, he does not need to keep hurting Tristan. Yeah. Like, this man has been through too much.
Yeah. There's so many layers to this because Piper isn't upset about going back.
No.
She isn't, going and exploring her roots out of trauma, I would say, because she was already using the blowgun. She was already interested.
Right, but
and she's excited to go home.
Right, no, I completely agree with you. That's exactly what I'm saying.
So
she already is doing it. That's great. Why can't she do that? Why does she need to be forcibly moved from her life back to a reservation is my question.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think the thing is, it all comes back to, I think he handles Piper okay, but not Tristan. Because the reason they're going there and the reason they lost their money is so that Tristan can reconnect with his past.
Right. And this is what I said. Yeah. I said it the first time we had this discussion in The Lost Hero. And I was like, Tristan could just have a different relationship with his identity that's not one of trauma, or we don't have to talk about it, or like there's no like and now he's being like forced to go back by Rick.
Yeah.
Like it just feels uncomfortable.
And if we want to take it in universe, but I'm again, I could not have been more uncomfortable. Like the one saving grace of this is the fact that Piper is welcoming this as part of her like emotional and identity exploration.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it okay. I was very deeply uncomfortable reading this and the unfortunate connotations. But you could have made it so that Tristan begins wanting to re-explore that.
Yeah.
And you could even, hey, he tries to make a move. Like, let's say you do want to go in the route of ruination financially.
Yeah.
He invests a bunch of money wanting to be the first, like, truly native blockbuster star. The movie flops, maybe because of Caligula, but at least he's like, well, embracing his identity.
He could have agency. Tristan never is allowed to have agency.
No,
at
the
all.
fact that he is walking around like a zombie in his house being like, what happened to my life?
And the mist, like he's literally, his memories are taken from him for good or bad, you know, whatever. But like his memories are taken from him. Even here, there's language sort of like, he's at least trying to help Piper. Like, let him be a really great supportive dad.
Well, I think that's where they leave him, though.
They do. I
think they get to the point where yes, he's like trying to do what he can. But like the last scene happens off happens off screen.
But as far as I think there's a really good part of where Apollo is narrating and being like, at this moment that could completely break him for good.
Yes.
This is that shows
no, you're
him
right. That is a good,
and he actually is able to step up and do what's necessary.
No, that is true. That was a good scene with Tristan,
and that's the thing that decided for me. Like they'll be okay, but even having him be in that situation where again no agency, it is very insensitive.
Yeah, I just think the thought was let's help him reconnect and with both his daughter and his heritage. But not giving credence to the fact that this guy earned everything he has. This guy rose from nothing and is a millionaire. And now you're just like, well, let's get rid of that so he can have his heritage. Like, it's
well, it's also like it could have been a really cool, like there's so many different ways to do this where Piper exploring her identity could have had her and Tristan have a really stronger, like she also wants to connect with him more. So they could have talked about it. She could have been asking him, you know, like, because clearly they were having some conversations. Yeah. He could have connected with his past in a way, like on his own terms in a way that made him feel comfortable still.
Yeah. But he didn't do that. And I think that the book is a lot weaker for it. This to me was the like writing low point of the book.
This to me is kicking someone while they're down, specifically Tristan. I feel like it feels that way for Piper too, but like she ends this book in such a strong way and as such a resilient character that I'm like, okay, she had a really crappy time, but like I don't feel as much like she was being kicked as while she was down, whereas Tristan had already been through all this stuff.
Tristan
and like
I really feel very bad for Tristan.
Yeah.
The people who I feel very bad for different reasons are Tristan and Jason. Where I just feel like they're being treated unfairly, not because like life has been so hard on them, although it has, but just like the book structure for both of the series have just like not been fair to them.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. All right. And I think with that, we should probably end out part 1. Because, you know, we still have a lot of recapping to go, but we're at a good point, I think. And so please come back next week for part 2, where we'll finish the recap, rank it, all that fun stuff. We have some emails and such. So thank you guys so much for listening, and may the gods be ever in your favor.